And I want you to know it's not your imagination. We are living an extraordinary time of change in the world around us. And what that means is that our lives are changing in ways that we simply have never seen before. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. How can we embrace this change in a healthy way? How can we find the resilience in our personal lives, in our families, in our communities to thrive in a healthy way in what now the experts are calling the time of extremes? So I'd like to begin with an amazing statement by a man I have tremendous respect for. His name is E.O. Wilson. He's an evolutionary biologist, and what he says about our time in history begins by saying that we are drowning in information while starving for wisdom. And that is such a powerful statement. And as I read this, I knew that he could have stopped right there, and it would have been just a beautiful and very accurate thing to say, but he didn't. He went on and elaborated on what he meant by this. And I'd like to share this as we begin our program today, because what E.O. Wilson said in this statement about our time and our world, it applies to you and me and this presentation today. He said, we are drowning in information. We're starving for wisdom. The world has changed. He said the world from this point forward is going to be run by people that he calls synthesizers. I love this. Synthesizers. A synthesizer is someone who can put together just the right information at just the right time, and then think critically about what they have done and make important choices wisely. And that is precisely where you and I find ourselves in our world today, and that's what this program is all about. It's no longer enough to be an expert in only one topic or one field, because we don't live our lives in a vacuum. Beautiful example. I was trying to share with my mother how to access her emails on the computer, thinking it would be a simple thing to do, but we couldn't just get her on to the emails. She had to figure out how to turn on the computer, how to hook up the computer, how to get onto the internet, how to choose the right browser, all of these things. And that's just a simple example of what is now a common fact. And that is that we must know a little bit about a lot of things and be able to weave these things together to solve the problems in our lives and to embrace change in a healthy way. So this program certainly reflects this. It's not only about the healing in our everyday lives. I'd like to talk about the context of our lives within which the need for the healing is occurring. Something is changing in our world, and my sense, my feeling, is that when the facts are clear, the choices become obvious. When the facts are clear, the choices become obvious. And ultimately, the better we know ourselves, the better equipped we are to deal with whatever life brings to our doorstep. So that would be the theme for everything I'm going to share in the next hour. So I want to begin just by acknowledging a couple of facts about our lives and where we are today. It is a fact that we are living a time of extremes. The experts are calling this a time of extremes, and it doesn't mean that only bad things are happening in the world, or even good things for that matter. What they're telling us is that big things are happening, big changes in the world, and that means big changes in our lives. And I think we're all sensing that our world is changing, and it's changing in ways that we have never seen. No one in this generation has witnessed the convergence of cyclic changes that we are living today, whether we're talking about climate or economy or conflict. Our world is changing in ways that we've never seen. And what that means is our lives are changing quickly and in ways that we're not used to. And I want to be very clear when I say this. I'm not saying that this is good or bad or right or wrong. I'm not saying that change is the result of mistakes made in the past. I think we've all done the best we could with what we knew when we had to make our choices. And now the world is changing, and new discoveries are giving us the reason to think differently about ourselves and our relationship to one another and our bodies and the healing that is required for us to embrace this change in a healthy way. So it is a fact now that we've got to think differently and we've got to live differently, perhaps more so than at any time in the past, so that we can be resilient. And we're not just talking about trying to find a way to survive. We'd like to thrive. How do we thrive in the presence of the changes? And how does that thriving reflect as the healing in our bodies in conventional and non-conventional ways, subconscious, conscious, emotional, and physical? This is all part of the healing that we're talking about here. So the world right now we're living a time of extremes, whether we're talking about peak oil or peak death, we're talking about climate change or social change. What we now know is that the changes in the world, we can no longer separate them from the changes in our everyday lives. Maybe we thought we could at some point in the past, but it's pretty much impossible to do these things now. The events unfolding halfway around the world in the economy and climate, they're affecting what happens in our own living room, the price we pay for food at the grocery stores, we put it on the dinner table. They're affecting our jobs, industry, careers, and all of that is leading to a new normal. And this is important. For many people, there has been a sense that the world was kind of chugging along in a way that allowed it to work pretty well. There were some things that could work better. And then something happened. And for some people, that something was 9/11, or maybe it was the economic collapse of '08. Whatever it is, there was a sense that something happened. And the reason I'm saying this is because so many people throughout the world, in the last 5 years, I've been on every continent of the earth except Antarctica. There's a sense that people are waiting for things to get back to normal, back to the way things used to be. They're waiting for the climate to go back to the regular seasons of rain and snow and temperature that they knew when they were kids. Or they're waiting for the economy to go back to the kind of interest rates where they could prepare for sending their kids to school or their retirement in a way that was 15, 20, 30 years ago. They're waiting for the old normal to return. And the reason I'm saying this to you is because we are now living a new normal. The old normal cannot return because the world that supported that normal no longer exists. That world is gone. The world changed. No one really told us. It wasn't really acknowledged in the mainstream media. And this has direct applications to our healing and our health because big change in the world has to mean big change in our lives. We cannot separate those two things. Big change in the world means stress in our lives. And I'm not saying that the stress necessarily in and of itself is right, wrong, good, or bad. But it's very specific kinds of stress we're dealing with. So I'm just going to ask a question that I am often asked when I'm at a live event. People ask me all the time. They say, why do we typically die between the age of 70 and 100 years of age? And at first it might seem like a silly question to some people because they'll say, well, old age, or, they'll say, that's just the way it is. But the new science, the best science of our time, is now telling us that our bodies have this extraordinary ability to heal, even in ways that we have been conditioned to believe they could not, in ways that we were taught they could not in our lifetimes, in the medical schools, in the classrooms, in the textbooks, in the mainstream documentaries. Every organ in our body now has been documented with the ability to heal itself. Every cell, every kind of cell in our body is now documented with the ability to heal itself, even those we were told could not. Pancreatic cells, brain cells, heart cells, spinal cord tissue. All of these things are now documented with the ability to heal themselves, but the key is that they must be given the right environment. They must be given the right conditions to do this. So, with these discoveries in mind, now that it is a fact that our body has the ability to heal itself and also reverse aging, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments, now this question actually takes on even greater meaning. If we have this ability, why do we typically die between 70 and 100 years? Why is that the typical lifespan of an adult in the Western world? And the answer is very powerful. The leading cause of deaths in adults over 65 in the Western world, we know, is heart disease, what we call heart disease. When I first began to understand this, my question was, what does that mean? When you say heart disease, it sounds like a catch-all for a lot of things that either aren't understood or are understood and maybe too complex to put into the answer. What is heart disease? And this is when I went to the open literature, the amazing work of James Blumenthal. And I have so much respect for this man from Duke University. He is a pioneer in making the kinds of relationships between mind and body that we're going to be talking about here. What James Blumenthal said was that heart disease, it's defined physically as things we all are familiar with: high blood pressure, vascular plaque, stroke. We all know about those things. But then he went a step further, and he linked these physical conditions to non-physical experiences. He said that the heart disease results from long-term experiences of fear, frustration, anxiety, and disappointment. A long term. So what he's saying to us is that it's stress. It is the stress from fear, the stress of the frustration or the anxiety or disappointment. And I want to be really clear. I don't want to leave you with the feeling that stress has to be a bad thing. There are positive, good kinds of stress. There are negative, bad kinds of stress. There's constructive stress. There's destructive stress. The key here is where he says long term. So what Blumenthal is talking about when he talks about the stress, it's not the stress that's the problem. It's unresolved stress. If we allow the stress to continue in our minds and our bodies, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month, that's where the problem comes in. And the new science now is telling us precisely why this is. So the unresolved stress from anything is what is leading to the disease that steals from us the very thing that we cherish the most, and that is life itself. So this 70 to 100 years, that appears to be how long this magnificent organ, our hearts, can hold up under the pressure of unresolved stress. If we don't know how to deal with the experiences of change, the 70 to 100 years is like stretching a rubber band. This is how long the rubber band can be stretched until it simply gives out. Something has to give. Now, I find this absolutely fascinating, and this would be interesting at any time, but now we've opened within a larger context. The world is changing. It's changing in ways that we've never seen, in ways that we're not used to. And those changes, if we do not have the tools to embrace the change in a healthy way, if we do not understand why the change is happening, if we don't understand where we fit into the change and see light at the end of the tunnel and know how to make life better for ourselves, that's stress. And that is what's killing people that we love, our friends, our families. That is what's stealing from us the very thing that we cherish the most. So resilience. Resilience is the key when we're dealing with any kind of change. And I know that resilience, the word itself, means different things to different people. Textbook discussions of resilience typically describe the ability to bounce back or to spring back to a normal functioning after a time of distress. So a family loses a loved one in a battlefield in Afghanistan, halfway around the world. Parents lose their son or their daughter. Brothers and sisters lose their siblings. Husbands and wives lose husbands and wives. And they must find the resilience to move on with life after that loss, after that trauma. So that's one form of resilience. We've all experienced it. I think it's a good definition. When I began studying the principles of resilience, I want to know if there is more. Is there more than the ability to bounce or spring back? And the Stockholm Resilience Institute is actually studying what is now being called expanded resilience. And it's the kind of resilience where we think and live each day in a way that allows us to embrace the obvious change that is upon us so that we don't have to spring back or bounce back. We've already accounted for that change in our lives. And that's the kind of resilience that I'm talking about here. The Institute of Heart Math is a pioneering research center in Northern California. I'm not their employee. I want to be very clear about that. But I know them very well, and I've worked with them for over 20 years. I've worked with the people at Heart Math. They are a pioneering research organization made of medical doctors, scientists, engineers, chemists, physicists, computer scientists that have left their respective professions to come together and pool their talent to explore the power of the human heart in unconventional ways. So we all know that the heart can pump blood, but you can build a machine to do that. The question is, what else? What else does our heart do? That's what the Institute of Heart Math is all about. So they're sharing some of their information with me, and I'm sharing some of it with you here today. And what you're seeing right now is a study of resilience that they performed, and it applies to all of us in our lives in one form or another. It was a 60-day study. And what they're showing is that when we are presented with a new experience in life, we have to rise the occasion and figure out something new and how to perform differently, that we typically go through a series of stages. And you can see the stages in front of you. Usually the first 10 days, whatever this new experience is, we're usually up for it. You know, we're out there, we're embracing it, we're researching it, we've got the energy to deal with a new change.